In this chapter, we'll be looking at follicles. To control the hair on a detailed level, for example, to have different lengths of hair, different colors, then you'll need to work with follicles, because the follicle is really the sort of atomic unit of the in-hair system. The first thing I want to show you is how to paint follicles onto a polygon surface. I'll select the scalp emitter object and go to the N-Dynamics menu set and choose N-Hair, Paint Hair Follicles, Options. And two windows open up. The Paint Hair Follicles settings lets us choose the operation and what particular attribute values we want to paint. The Tool Settings window is, of course, the familiar Artisan interface that allows us to control the brush settings. In the Paint Hair Follicles settings, we could paint into an existing hair system, but we don't have one yet, so our only option is create a new one. In the Output pull-down, we want to choose Paint Effects and NURBS Curves, because of course we want to have NURBS curves to style the hair later. I'll increase the follicle density up to 50 in U and V, and I'll leave the points per hair and hair length at their defaults of 6 and 2. That means, of course, we'll have 6 points on each curve, and the hair length will be 2 centimeters. To save myself some time, I want to turn on reflection for the brush. So in the PaintScripts tool window, I'll open up Stroke and enable Reflection. Okay, so now I'm ready to begin. I want to paint the hair at the top of the scalp to be 2 centimeters in length. Tumble around. Make sure I don't miss any spots. I can go back in and paint over areas later if I need to. And I can actually change the length later if I need to as well, but it's just better to get it right the first time if you can. So that's the top of the scalp at 2 centimeters. Set the hair length down to 1.5. Now try to taper the length of the hair so that it gracefully sort of transitions from long hair at the top to shorter hair on the sides and the back. Bring it down to a value of 1 centimeter. And if I want to cover the area more quickly, I can make a larger brush by holding down the B key. And make that brush larger to cover that area more quickly. And then the shortest hairs I'll set down to a value of 0.5 and reduce my brush size again with the B key. And it does get a little bit tricky. Sometimes Maya doesn't want to let you do that, so you have to do it 2 or 3 times. But now I've got basically the look that I want. I've got full coverage and I've got varying lengths from 2 centimeters at the top to 0.5 centimeters at the bottom and the sides. All right, very good. Now, before we go into dealing with any of the dynamic properties of the hair, I do want to point out that the distribution of follicles is not uniform here. If we created follicles using the create hair command that would just globally distribute follicles across a selected object, we use that command, then we could turn on equalize, and that would make sure that the follicles are all evenly distributed. Here, there is no equalize function, and so the distribution is purely determined by the scale of the UVs on the polygon object. So if we want to move these around without having to select them individually, then we could go into the UV texture editor and scale the UVs. So let's do that. Go ahead and close these windows. Grab the select tool, and with the scalp object still selected, I will go into the polygons menu set and choose Edit UVs, UV Texture Editor, and tumble around. I want to look at the character's right sideburn here, and right-click in the UV Texture Editor and choose UV Component Mode, and I want to select these UVs at the end here, holding down Control and Shift to select those, and then grow that selection with Shift period. And now I can grab the Scale tool and show you that as I scale these UVs up or down, I can change the distribution of follicles. So if I want fewer follicles, then I'll reduce the scale of the UVs, meaning we'll have fewer follicles in that area there. And I want to make sure that I don't have weird seams or gaps, so just want to clean this up by moving this a little bit closer to the rest of the UVs. I don't need to be quite as precise as I would need to be if I was actually texturing. Here we've got a lot more leeway than we would if we were texturing. I can select the UVs in this viewport as well, and then hold down Shift period and grow that selection out. I go too far, I can use Shift comma and shrink the selection. I can also hold down Control Shift and add once again. I just want to get all of those at the very end there. And then grab the scale tool. And again, scale that down. And then position it so that we don't have any issues there. Had one little guy there that was errant, so I'll go and select him and just kind of move him into place. All right, that's pretty good. Now we want to exit out of component mode. I can right-click in the viewport on the polygon object and go back to object mode. And there's one little caveat here, something that may not be immediately obvious. And that is, when we reduce the number of follicles on the surface, they were not actually deleted. They just got dropped at the origin of the scene. And so if I dolly out and look at the origin here, you will see that we got a little clump of hair there. Curious. We just need to delete that. This little arrow is the nucleus node. I want to move that out of the way. And the hair itself are the paint effect strokes. I don't want to delete that because that, if I deleted that, it would delete all of the hair on the surface. So I don't want to delete this, but I do want to just hide it. So I'll just very quickly turn the visibility off in the channel box, set that visibility to 0, and then drag a rectangle here. And that is all of the leftover follicles and curves. And if you really want to, you can go into the outliner and verify, in fact, that we've selected some follicles and curves. So scrolling down, we got hundreds of follicles here. Some of them are currently selected, some of these last ones here in the list. Okay, so those follicles and curves need to go. So I've got them selected, and then I'll just press the delete key on the keyboard. All right, very good. Okay, so we want to re-enable the visibility on the strokes. So I'll go back to the outliner, select PFX Hair 1, and set visibility back to 1 on there. And now we can just set our basic dynamic properties as we always do. I'll select the nucleus node and hit Control-A, go into the attribute editor, scroll down, I'm looking for space scale. That's in the scale attributes section. And because my scene is built at unity scale, the space scale will need to be set to 0.01. And I can select the hair itself and go into the hair system shape node and change up the usual dynamic properties things that we always do. Go into dynamic properties and set stretch resistance up to maybe 100. Same with compression resistance. Turn that up to about 100. And then in forces, we can give it a little bit of motion drag, maybe a value of 0.2 there. Damp, I'll set to a value of 1. And rewind, play the simulation and see what it behaves like. And it seems pretty good. The only major thing I still need to do is turn on collisions for the head. So I'll unhide the head, select it, go back to the End Dynamics menu set, and choose End Mesh, Create Passive Collider. Rewind to play the simulation. And it runs much more slowly now, but basically we've got what we wanted. We've got the hair distributed more or less the way we want it at the correct lengths on the character's head.